Hello. Today we're going to go over how Python modules work. As a bonus, I'm going to show you how to add modules to pip so you can share them to anyone, like on the internet, using pip. Pretty cool. Python modules are a way to organize code into reusable files. They help keep your code base clean, modular, and easy to maintain. To create a module, you basically just create a Python file, and you can use it as a module. But you can also make directories and use them as modules. So let's go over a quick example. All right, here we can see we have a file called test1.py, and then we have another file called test2.py. In test1.py, we are printing nice, then we are importing test2, which is in the same directory as test1, and then we are printing test2.engine. If we go ahead and look at test2.py, we are printing getting it, and then we are setting engine to equal cool. Now, let's go ahead and run this. Here we can see that we're printing nice first, then within test2.py, we're printing getting it. This is because when we import test2, we are basically running the test2 file so that we can reference things from the test2 file. So the entire test2 file is then run, which is why we print getting it. And then we can then reference test2 as though it's a variable, basically, or a class. And in this case, we can then reference the engine value, or the engine variable, and we can then print it, and we see cool. Pretty cool. So that's how you can reference a file that's in the same folder. But what if it's not in the same folder? Well, you can actually mark a given directory as a Python module by adding a file called an __init__.py file. I'm just going to call them init.py files. Otherwise, if you just have a directory that either doesn't have this init.py file or just has normal Python files, then you can reference files from within that directory like this. So here we see that we have from stuff import cool or from stuff.cool import greet. Now, if we go ahead and see here, we have a stuff directory, and within the stuff directory, we have a file called cool. If we go to this cool file, we can see that we have a variable called supercool set to wow, and then we have two functions. One is called greet, which just prints out the name that you're passing it, saying hello. The second one is a private function because it has the underscore at the start. And this is just saying hello name, shh, little ASMR for you there, I guess. Now, in this case, if we say from stuff import cool, we can then reference cool like we were importing stuff, or like we were referencing test2 before. So we could say cool.greet. Another thing we could do though is say from stuff.cool import greet. And in this case, we are then referencing specifically the greet function. So with this line, we can't reference, for instance, the super cool value. But with this line, we could by typing cool.supercool. So let's go ahead and run this and we'll see what we have. So we got our hello Jake and our hello Sammy. In both cases, they're calling the exact same function. One is just calling it directly through a direct pointer to that function, whereas the first one is referencing the cool package or the cool file, and then referencing the greet function within it. Pretty sweet. All right, but what's with this init.py file that we're not really using yet? Well, let's take a look at that. So the init.py file, if it has content within it, it's actually setting the directory as a Python package. This means that you can then just reference the entire thing by writing import stuff. Then if you, where stuff is the name of the directory, then we could say stuff.cool.greet and then Jake. But if we run this, we will see that we don't actually know what stuff or cool is. That's because if we, I don't want to do that. That's because if we go ahead and look at our init.py file, it's empty. So what we can do here is we can just write our imports for our files here. Now, we might want to be able to just type from cool import greet, or just import cool. let's see what happens when we run this. We get an error. Why are we getting an error? Well, because we now have content within our init.py file, now it is considering this entire package, this entire directory to be a package. But there's no package called cool within this directory. So in order to add an import for cool here, we would have to type from .cool import greet. Now, we wouldn't even need to add the .cool here. We can just have .greet. Now, the reason that we have to add a dot here, because, well, let's run this. We can see it works. But if we don't have a dot, we can see that when we run it, it says there's no module named cool. That's because when we have content within this .init.py file, it is now making the entire directory of stuff into a package. But there is no package within this directory called cool because we've kind of overwritten that. At least that's how I understand it. If I'm wrong, please leave a comment down below. But that's how I have interpreted it, and that's how I've worked with it before. So in this case, if we pass a dot to it, it knows that it's basically trying to reference something within the current directory, not from the overarching package. So that's awesome. But what else can we do with this init.py file? Well, we can actually reference or set any kind of variables we want here. So we could reference set name equals Jake. Now, within our test, we could just print, or actually we could just set here stuff.name. And if we run this, we can then see it's then referencing Jake. Because if I go to this, it's pointing to this name equals Jake within our init.py. Pretty sweet. One of the reasons this is really cool is because if you have a file, say you're creating this code for a bunch of other people to use, and you have a special class inside that you want to have configured a very specific way, you can just configure it within your init.py file, and it's done for you. So yeah, that's pretty great, because then anybody who's using your code can then just use it more easily. And as all of us know, using code easier is a good thing. Now, another thing you can do is reference stuff by saying from stuff import star. Now, what does this do? Well, in this case, we can then reference basically everything within the stuff init.py without actually referencing or having the prefix of stuff. So if we run this, we can see that we get the exact same thing, but we just didn't have to add the stuff prefix. This is kind of a little bit frowned upon. You can do it. There's nothing really wrong with it. It's just you don't really know what you're getting in this instance, right? You don't know what values are set. Like if you try and set greet to be something like greet equals nice, right? We might get an error here. We didn't get an error actually, which is even more of a problem because we have now overwritten a value that we've imported from stuff to be just the value nice. So if maybe our code later on was trying to reference greet, the function, well, then we get an error because now it's now it's just a string called nice. So it's kind of better to import things very specifically because then you know what you have in your file. And you'd be more likely to see that you're going to run into some issue like that if you import things more directly. But let's say you want to allow for this. Maybe we want people to only be able to reference the cool file within our stuff module. In order to do that, you can just add a __all__ equals, and then set it to a list where the list is a name or a list of names of files. So in this case, we can set it to cool. So what does this do? Well, this means that we no longer have, if we try and run this, we'll see greet is not defined. The reason greet isn't defined is because the cool file is now defined. So that's the only thing that's defined if you use your import or from stuff import star. So that means that we would then have to do cool.greet and then the name, because name is now also not something we can reference because it is not in our cool here. If we add name here, will it work? And actually, no. It does work. Pretty cool. So it doesn't have to just be files here. It can also be references to variables within your init.py, or I guess potentially variables outside of that as well, or from within other files. But yeah, pretty cool. Another thing you can do, which I'm not going to go over too deeply here, is that you can just add a directory to your system path. Your system path varies how it works exactly between Windows or Mac or Linux, but basically it's just a directory that is available to anything that's running on your command prompt, or a list of directories. So that's why you can write Python. It's because the Python bin file, or bin directory, sorry, is added to your system.path, which means that on your command prompt or your terminal, you can just type Python and it knows what you're talking about. So you can do the same thing with Python modules, where you can add a Python module directory, and then you can reference that from any Python file because it's in your path for your system. This is maybe a bit of an error-prone thing to do, because you can easily run into issues with this if you download your code onto a different computer because your path isn't set, and then things would break. So probably shouldn't do that, but it is an option if you really want to. All right, so what if we want to make our code, like this incredible code right here, available to anyone? Well, we can upload it to pip. So let's do that. All right, so first things first, we need to create an account on pip. So luckily, I already have an account on pip called JK. And once you've created your account, there's a few steps you have to do. First, create your account. Secondly, verify your account. They'll send you an email and you have to click the button. Thirdly, at least I think I have to do this, or I had to do it, I think, you have to add two-factor authentication. So this can just be done by doing something like using like Authy, Google Authenticator, or a bunch of different types of authenticators. There's lots of them out there. The third thing you need to do, I think there are other ways of doing this, but this is the fastest way that I found, and it was pretty simple, is you have to create an API key. In order to do that, you can go to, once you're logged into pypi.org, where you find your pip packages, you can go to account settings, and I need to log in again. So within your account settings, you just scroll on down and you can find this API tokens spot. And if you go ahead and create an API token, you see I've did one here for testing. I'll remove this token now because I don't need it anymore. But if we want to add one here, we can click Add API Token. We can give it a name. Hi, YouTube. Subscribe if you want to, that's cool. We can specify specific scopes. So in this case, we're just going to say everything. I'm going to delete this afterwards, so if you want to try and copy this, go for it, but it'll be gone. In this case, then we copy the token. Now, the next thing we need to do is download a pip package. What we're going to do is do Python 3 m pip install twine. Now, this is a pip package that, as far as I know, is related to pip directly, so it allows you to kind of interface with pip a little bit more easily. Now, next thing we want to do is create a new file. We're going to call this setup.py. Within this file, we are going to, hold on, let me just make sure I can get this thing back because I'm going to need to copy and paste something. We are going to put in this information here, where we're going to say from setup tools, import setup, and then we are going to create a new thing called setup, and we'll call this hi YouTube. And then the module, we'll call it test1. Test1. And then we don't have any kind of requirements or dependencies because our Python module doesn't do anything really. I'm just going to delete this afterwards. But then we can see here, we now have kind of defined our Python module that we are going to upload into pip. So now what we have to do is actually convert our setup.py into a distribution file. I believe it just converts it into a tar file, but in order to do that, you just do Python 3 or whatever Python version you have, setup.py, and then do sdist. And if you run this, we can see that it does a bunch of stuff. And then we see it's created this tar archive file, which is under this dist directory. So it says hi YouTube, and it's just this tar file, which you can't open. So yeah, so far so good. All right, so then we're going to type Python 3-m to specify that we're running this using Python 3 because I installed this for Python 3. Twine upload dist /star. And then when we run this, we will see that it's going to upload things, pass it a username. When we want to do this, interestingly enough, we actually have to pass it the username __ token __. Now, if we do this, it's basically saying that we are going to upload something using an API key. So if I press enter, we are then going to enter our password as the API key itself. So then I can go ahead and paste that and press enter, and we will see that we're now uploading hi YouTube. So now if we go and open this, we can now see we now have hi YouTube by Jake A, and it is such a glorious project, isn't it? You can see if it's there, I guess, but I'm going to delete it right after I finish recording this because I don't want to put garbage on their site more than I have to for this demo. So that's it. I hope this helped you out. Don't forget to like and subscribe down below. Also, did it shine when I said subscribe? If so, drop a comment because that's pretty cool. Remember, I'm Jake. You're awesome. This has been Python Modules. Cheers.